Welcome to this presentation on critical discourse analysis and language teaching. Before we begin, I would like you to think about something simple. Do we use language or does language use us? Because every sentence, every headline, every textbook dialogue carries meaning. Beyond grammar, it carries ideology, identity, and power. And today we are going to uncover that. This material was prepared by Group 11, including myself, Naswa Aliasifa, and my friend Rafika Dirahmatika. We hope this learning experience doesn't just give you information, but helps you see language differently. By the end of this session, you should be able to understand the concept of critical discourse analysis, identify how power and ideology appear in discourse, recognize framing techniques, especially in media, and analyze how English textbook construct social meaning. So this is not just about studying language, it is about studying how language shapes us.
Okay, before I explain about the material, I wanna explain about the relationship between discourse analysis or DA and critical discourse analysis or CDA. So, discourse analysis is the study of how language is used in a real context, not just a grammar. Discourse analysis researches how meaning is built in communication, how the conversation structure works, how the text is structured, and how people understand each other in a social context. Meanwhile, critical discourse analysis is a special branch of discourse analysis. The CDA itself is in discourse analysis, but it has a narrower and deeper focus. If the discourse analysis look at the meaning and structure, then the CDA sees the meaning, structure, and power or ideology. For example, from the usual question in the discourse analysis, the questions are such as how is the language used, while the CDA question is why is the language used that way, and what is this important, or who benefits or disadvantages, like that. And now we move to the definition of critical discourse analysis. So, CDA is discourse analysis research that primarily examines how the abuse of social power and inequality is enforced, reproduced, legitimized, and opposed by text and conversation in social and political contexts. With this antecedent research, critical discourse analysis take an explicit position and those seek to understand, uncover, and ultimately challenge social inequality. This is also why the CDA can be characterized as a social movement made up of politically committed discourse analysis. Verkov defines discourse as a social practice, that is, language used in a social context, not just a linguistic structure. According to Verkov, CDA is an approach that analyzes the relationship between language, power, and society. how discourse, such as text, speech, and media, function in society and politics. He emphasized that discourse not only reflects social relations but also shapes social practice and power structures. And the next is characteristic of CDA according to Verlof. Some important features. One is language as a social practice, analyze not only of text but also of how they are produced, distributed, and consumed in social context. Two is regarding power and ideology. CDA focus on how discourse reflect and reproduce domination, power, ideology, or social inequality. And three is interdisciplinary, combines linguistics, sociology, political theory, and cultural theory. And four is three-dimensional analysis. Text is micro, descriptive practice is meso, and social practice is macro. This is Verlof typical framework of analysis. And five is normative and critical. CDA not only describe but also critiques its meaning, demonstrates inequality, expose bias and ideology, and potentially advocates for social change. Okay, and the next is Verloff's approach or three-dimension model. Three-dimensional model. Verlof developed a three-dimensional model as a framework for analysis. Text microanalysis, language within text for linguistic elements like lexicon, grammar, style, metaphor, and sentence structure. And the next is discourse practice analysis of meso or communication process and how texts are produced, distributed, consumed, who is the author, who is the audience, what institutions are involved. And the next is social practice of macro analyze broader social reality of how this discourse practice is embedded in social culture and institutional structures, including power relation and ideologies. And the next is principle of CDA. Have three. One is CDA and social political. Two is power relation, and three is ideology. One is CDA and social political. So in the principle, discourse in media, politics, or education is not natural. Media or politic texts are shaped by the author and shape socio-political structures. Through text analysis, descriptive practice, and social practice, we can see how the media or institution use language to reproduce or challenge ideologies. For example, like a media reporting on a student protest with the title is Masa Ricuh, versus aktivis damai menuntut. This is have a two different word choices, so different points of view. In the analyze, at the text level, the use of the word massa and ritual carries a negative connotation, while the word of aktivis damai carries a positive connotation. And in the critic of discourse, who write the news, does the media have a bias against the government or students? And how is the news distributed? In social critique, this news takes place in the context of media control, political power over demonstration. The language chosen helps maintain the narrative that the demonstration is a nuisance, not the people's voice. And two is power relation. CDA focus on how power relation like domination, control, inclusion or exclusion are embodied in discourse. Language can be a tool to support power, head control or exclude certain groups. For example, a political speech, kami membawa perubahan bagi rakyat. In the analyze, have a domination, the speakers or politicon position himself as the we or kami, actor who brings about change, while the people or rakyat as the recipient show a relationship of superiority. And control, the language bring about change, indicates control over the process of change. The people are made object. And in the inclusion or exclusion, the rakyat as an inclusive category, but who is considered rakyat? Is it an opposition group or minority? Perhaps the exclusion occurs if a particular group is not considered part of the people of rakyat but the speaker. And the next is ideologies. Explanation: ideology is a system of beliefs or values that is hidden in discourse and influence how reality is formed. CDA explore how texts contain value, bias, and ideologies relate to gender, social class, culture, and etc. For example, a beauty product ad that use the phrase menjadi cantik adalah kunci sukses. In the analyze, have a value or ideology in here. The ideology that physical beauty is essential to success. Patriarchy or capitalism that exploits the image of woman. And the text menjadi cantik as a menjadi, menjadi cantik as a phrase that contains the value that women should be beautiful. And in the discourse practice, have companies media use such discourse to market product and reinforce beauty values. And in the social practice, have a patriarchal and consumptive ideologies spread through advancing of evac society's perception of women, body image, and social relationship.
After we discuss about critical discourse analysis, let's move to the next material and begin with the phenomenal story. In September 2020, at the peak of the pandemic, an unexpected scene unfolded on Indonesian television. An empty chair. It was not a seat for the audience, but for the most anticipated source. The Minister of Health at the time, Dr. Terawan Agus Putranto. This moment, which I call the empty chair moment, is far more than a physical absence. It is a powerful discursive event. The empty chair becomes a symbol of absent accountability, a symbol of public communication crisis, and a symbol of bold media critique. In critical discourse analysis or CDA, we don't just see an empty chair, we ask the critical question, like, who holds the power here, which ideology is at stake? That empty chair leads us to that empty chair is our first invitation to use a critical lens. Let's study the tool. First, CDA and media framing. If CDA is the large umbrella, framing is one of the sharpest analytical techniques within it. Framing is the camera lens we use to view reality. According to Robert Entman, the communication expert, to frame is to select some aspect of a perceived reality and make them more salient. The key takeaway: journalists don't just report what happened, they report why they choose to report. Observe the 4 framing tools on the right. These are the 4 levels the media pulls into control narrative. First is selection. Choosing to focus on recovery data, not dead reads. The second is exclusion. Deliberately omitting comments from opposing parties. Third, emphasizes the repetition of certain words. Fourth is labeling, the use of value-laden words. CDA enters here because behind every frame there is always an ideology and power relation being concealed. Let's connect this theory to the empty chair case. Dissecting the 2021 study by Lailia Guaira and others, which analyzed the Mata Najwa monologue, this is a classic example of how CDA techniques are applied to real media discourse. Let's look at 3 linguistic techniques used for framing based on Verklo text analysis. First, repetition of words, kenapa or why. This repetition creates a discursive pressure on the public official. It is not a mere question, it is a powerful demand for accountability. Second is diction and sarcasm. Like words, like these several words. Second is diction and sarcasm. Najwa's use of the label yang paling low profile or the most low profile is not a compliment. It is a rhetorical tool or sarcasm used to criticize the tendency of officials to hide during the crisis. Third is metaphor. The metaphor di atas tanah beradu banyak kepentingan symbolically frames the handling of the health issue as a power play and chaos. Now, let's focus on the final, most powerful sentence on this slide. Linguistically, this is a very polite imperative sentence. However, in the discursive practice, based on Fairclough's second dimension, the act of speaking this to an empty chair is the meaning shifts entirely. CDA reveals this sentence becomes a sharp irony. Najwa, as the media gatekeeper, uses the platform's power to dominate the discourse, expose power imbalance, and shape public ideology. So far, we have seen the devastating power of language in the media, but what if this power is hidden in the place we consider most neutral in our classrooms? We transition now to the CDA in textbooks. If media shapes today's opinion, then textbooks shape future consequences. Textbooks are often seen as objective sources of knowledge, yet in CDA, the textbook is an ideological battleground. They contain a hidden curriculum. They normalize the words that the textbook creators or the educational system want to create. What do we look for in a textbook? There is three things. First is hidden ideology, like gender bias, for example, all scientists are male, or pilots are male, or all female are cooking. And then there is a cultural bias, use only Western images, neglecting local culture. The second is representation based on Van Leeuwen, who is represented as the active social actor, subject of the sentence, and who is passive, who is excluded entirely from the story or narrative. The third is analysis tools. We use transitivity and modality, or the level of certainty or obligation. Why is this crucial? Because students internalize this ideology as they learn the language. We are not just learning grammar, we are learning how the words works. We are not just learning grammar, we are learning how the word works. Let's dissect a very specific example from Wijayanti's research 2021, which analyzed maritime English course books. This is about how power relations and pragmatic competence are performed in a learning text. This maritime textbook teaches cadets how to communicate on a ship. The analysis compares two books, Madeline's as a general and IMO SMCP. Madeline's as a general and IMO SMCP as the compares two books. The key points is imperatives. This is where power relations are clearless. The text must teach cadets not only how to command, but how to issue warning, advice, or instruction. Finding by Wijayanti 2021, Textbooks often focus on the simplest imperative form, neglecting the complex pragmatic context. As the result, cadets might be able to say, "Stop the engine," but they struggle to differentiate nuance between an emergency command and routine instruction. CDA reveals a pragmatic gap. For example, the Merlin's books uses many pictures. This helps visualization. But there is a problem. But there is the problem. Without rich textual context like IMO SMCP books, cadets only respond to the visual stimulus. Cadets only respond to the visual stimulus, not the deep pragmatic meaning. They are quick to respond, but less accurate in ambiguous situations. This shows the ideology. Books focusing on visuals tend to prioritize communication efficiently over hierarchical correctness and danger accuracy. CDA demands balance. Visual engagement must be balanced with semantic depth and correct power representation between instructor and cadet. From the two case studies, media and textbooks, we have implicitly used the same tool. There is a firecloak 3D model. This is our true scalpel. CDA must always involve these three dimensions. First, text analysis or micro level. What do we see linguistically? Like direction, grammar, like diction, grammar, metaphor, transitivity. For example, in a meta-najwa, analyzing the diction, low profile, and the ironic sentence. Second, discursive practice or meso level. How is the text produced and distributed? Like genre, consumption, production process. For example, in Nata Najwa, the production of Najwa's monologue as a gatekeeping genre distributed virally on YouTube. Third is social practice or macro level. How does this discourse relate to larger social structures like ideology, power, politics? Example from the Mata Najwa, critique of the government, public power relations during the pandemic context. Remember, CDA is not analyzing just one dimension. We must connect all three to reveal how language reproduces and resists unequal power. After we discuss about critical discourse analysis, what is the impact for us as a language academics? CDA gave us three concrete impacts. First, uncovering hidden agendas. We don't be easily deceived by seemingly neutral media or teaching materials, and we resisting opinion manipulation. We become smart producers and consumers of discourse. Next is building a critical society. We contribute to a healthier public consequences. And the last is building a critical society. We contribute to healthier public consequences that demands accountability. So, CDA is not just a course, it is an intellectual self-defense tool. In an area where language and media are the most powerful weapons. That concludes our critical discourse section of media framing and textbook ideology. I hope this insight opens our critical eyes and ears. We are from group 11. I think that's all from our presentation. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day. and see you.